It was a quiet afternoon when Lucas first saw her. He had been walking home from work, his mind focused on the usual routine: grab some food, catch up on a bit of reading, and relax. But as he passed an alley, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just another person asking for help, but when he got closer, he realized it was something different. A woman was sitting against the wall, her clothes torn and her face pale. She looked out of place in the busy city, like she didn't belong here. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear and uncertainty. She seemed out of touch with the world around her, almost as if she were lost. Lucas hesitated for a moment. He wasn't the kind of person who typically stopped for strangers, but something about this woman made him pause. Maybe it was the desperation in her eyes, or the way she was looking at the people walking past her, like she had no idea how to fit in. "Are you all right?" Lucas asked, stepping closer. The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes flickered for a moment, studying him, as if she were trying to understand what kind of person he was. Then, without a word, she slowly got to her feet, brushing dirt from her clothes. "I'm lost," she said in a soft, trembling voice. Her accent was strange, unfamiliar, but her words were clear enough. Lucas was still unsure of what to make of the situation. She looked like she needed help, but there was something about her that seemed different. He didn't know it yet, but she wasn't from around here. She wasn't even from Earth. "Where are you from?" he asked, trying to get a sense of what was going on. The woman hesitated, looking down at the ground for a moment. She looked like she wanted to say something, but the words seemed stuck. I have nowhere to go," she finally admitted. Lucas's heart softened. He couldn't leave her out here, especially not when she seemed so vulnerable. "Come with me. I'll help you," he said. The woman looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and relief. She didn't know what to expect, but there was something about the kindness in Lucas's voice that made her believe him. As they walked through the streets, Lucas couldn't help but notice how out of place she seemed. She walked with an elegance that was almost otherworldly, but there was a certain sadness in her posture, as if she carried the weight of something heavy. Lucas didn't know it yet, but this woman, this stranger, was more than just someone down on their luck. She was hiding a past so complicated that it would change both of their lives forever. For now, all he knew was that she needed help, and he was the one offering it. Little did he know, this simple act of kindness was the beginning of something neither of them could have ever expected. As Lucas guided the woman through the bustling streets, he couldn't help but wonder about her. She was quiet, only speaking when necessary, and her eyes darted nervously at every person they passed. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Her movements were graceful, but there was an air of sadness about her, like she didn't belong here. "Where are you from?" Lucas asked again, hoping she might open up more. The woman, who had introduced herself as Kayla, looked at him but didn't answer right away. Instead, she seemed lost in thought, as if she was trying to figure out how much to reveal. She took a deep breath before speaking, her voice softer than before. "I come from far away," she said quietly, glancing around. "Not from here, not from this world." Lucas raised an eyebrow, unsure of what she meant. He didn't press her further, though. There was something about Kayla's tone, something that made him realize she wasn't lying, even if her story didn't make sense. "You're not from Earth?" he asked, trying to process her words. Kayla nodded slowly, looking down at her hands as if trying to hide the pain in her eyes. "I was once part of an empire, a powerful one. My people ruled many worlds. I was supposed to be a queen." She paused for a moment, as if the words were too heavy to speak. "But now, I have nothing." Lucas was taken aback. A queen? She didn't look like someone who had once ruled an empire. She looked like a woman struggling to survive, someone who was barely holding on. He wondered what had happened to her, but he didn't want to push her too hard. "What happened?" he asked gently, not wanting to cause her more pain but needing to understand. Kayla sighed, her shoulders sagging as if the weight of her past was too much to carry. My people, my family betrayed me. They cast me out, left me with nothing. I was abandoned, alone, and I ended up here." Her voice cracked slightly, and Lucas could see the tears welling up in her eyes, though she quickly wiped them away. The more she spoke, the more Lucas realized how complex her situation was. She wasn't just a lost stranger. She was someone who had lost everything. A former queen, cast aside by her own people. It didn't make sense, and yet the sadness in her eyes made him believe it. "I'm sorry," Lucas said, feeling helpless. He wasn't sure what else to say. He was just an ordinary man, and here she was, a woman who had once held power beyond anything he could imagine. Kayla smiled faintly at him, but it was a smile filled with sorrow. "It's not your fault. No one could understand what it's like to lose everything. But you've been kind to me, even though I don't deserve it." Lucas shook his head. "You don't have to explain yourself. You're not alone anymore." Kayla's eyes met his, and for the first time since they'd met, he saw a flicker of hope in them. Perhaps there was a chance for her to rebuild her life here, with him by her side. But as the weight of her past continued to hang over them, Lucas realized that helping her wouldn't be easy. She had a lot more to face, and so did he. The days that followed were strange for both Lucas and Kayla. Despite everything she had been through, Kayla adapted quickly to Earth, though there were moments when she would freeze, staring at things in a way that made Lucas uncomfortable. It was clear that she wasn't just learning human life. She was struggling with it. Still, Lucas couldn't deny the strange connection that was forming between them. One evening, as they sat in his modest apartment, Lucas prepared dinner while Kayla quietly watched from the couch. She had helped him set the table, but her hands trembled as she did it. Her past was still heavy on her, and it showed in her every movement. Lucas couldn't help but notice how lonely she seemed, despite her quiet strength. He placed the food on the table and sat across from her, his curiosity growing by the day. "So what exactly are you going to do now?" he asked, trying to keep the conversation light. Kayla sighed and set her fork down, her gaze distant. "I don't know. I've been thinking about it, but—" She hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. Lucas leaned in, sensing she was about to share something important. "But—" Kayla looked at him, and for a moment, he could see the same pain in her eyes that she had shown the first time they met. "But I don't belong here, Lucas. I'm from a world far away, and I can't just forget that. My people, they wouldn't welcome me back. I have no status, no title, nothing left. I've been rejected, and I'm afraid I'll always be alone." Lucas felt his heart ache for her. He couldn't imagine what it must be like to lose everything and have no place to go. "You're not alone," he said softly, trying to reassure her. Kayla's eyes softened, but then she did something unexpected. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm and gentle. "Lucas, I've been thinking. I have no one left. No family. No friends, no home. But you've shown me kindness. You're the only person who has treated me like I matter." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't have much to offer, but if you marry me, I'll make sure you're taken care of. You'll never have to worry about anything again." Lucas blinked in surprise, not quite sure what she meant. "Marry you? But why would you ask me that?" Kayla's expression was serious, almost desperate. "Because, Lucas, I have nothing left to lose. And you—" She hesitated, looking at him as if she were searching for the right words. "You're the only one who hasn't rejected me. If I don't find someone to help me, I don't know what will happen to me. I don't want to go back to my people. They won't accept me. But you have something that I've never had, someone who will stand by me." Lucas sat back in his chair, taken aback by her words. He had always known that Kayla was different, but hearing her confess her fears so openly made him realize just how much she had lost. It wasn't just about marriage or status. It was about survival, about finding a place where she could belong. "I don't know what to say," Lucas admitted, his mind racing. "You're asking me to marry you, but I don't even know if I'm the right person for you." Kayla's gaze softened, her hand still holding his. "I don't need a perfect marriage, Lucas. I just need someone who will be there for me. Someone who will care. And I think you're that person." Lucas stared at her, his thoughts swirling. Could he really agree to something so life-changing? Was he ready to marry someone he barely knew, someone who wasn't even from his world? He knew one thing for sure. He couldn't leave her alone. And maybe, just maybe, this unexpected proposal was the beginning of something neither of them could have imagined. Lucas sat quietly, staring at Kayla's hand still resting in his. Her fingers were soft, but her grip was firm, as if she was afraid he might pull away. The weight of her proposal hung in the air between them, thick and heavy. He could feel his heart beating faster, his thoughts racing. Kayla, the woman who had once been a queen in her own world, was asking him to marry her. But how could he say yes? They barely knew each other. Sure, he had been helping her for the past few days, and he couldn't deny that he felt a connection. But marriage, that was a huge step. He was just an ordinary guy, living an ordinary life. Could he really be the one to help Kayla rebuild hers? "Kayla," Lucas finally said, breaking the silence. "This is a lot to ask. I don't even know you that well. I don't know anything about your people, your world. How could I make a decision like this?" Kayla's eyes dropped to the table, her face softening. "I understand if it's too much. I never expected you to say yes immediately. But I don't have many options. I'm a stranger here, Lucas. And even if you don't know me well, you've already shown me more kindness than anyone else ever has." Lucas's heart twisted at her words. He had always believed in helping others, but this situation felt different. He wasn't just offering her food or shelter. He was offering her a future, something neither of them had ever considered before. The thought of it felt overwhelming. "I don't want you to think this is just about helping you out of pity," Kayla continued. "It's not like that. I'm not asking you to take care of me out of kindness alone. I'm asking because I don't want to be alone anymore. I don't want to be rejected again." Lucas swallowed hard, the weight of her pleas sinking deep into him. She had lost everything: her title, her people, her home. All she had now was him. And yet, how could he give her something as big as marriage when he had his own doubts, his own fears? "You're asking a lot, Kayla," Lucas said quietly. "But I can't pretend I don't feel something here. I'm not sure what it is, but I can't ignore it. I don't know if I'm the right person to help you. I don't even know if I'm ready for something like this. But you're right about one thing. I can't just leave you out there on your own." Kayla's eyes softened as she listened to him. And for a moment, Lucas thought he saw a flicker of hope in her expression. She wasn't asking for everything all at once. She wasn't demanding the impossible. She just wanted someone to stand by her side. Someone who wouldn't turn away, no matter what. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That's all I need right now. Just someone to be there." Lucas took a deep breath. His heart was heavy, and his mind was still unsure. But he knew one thing for sure: Kayla needed him. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, he couldn't turn his back on her. "I'll help you," Lucas said, his voice steady, though his mind was still in turmoil. "But we'll have to take this one step at a time. Let's not rush things." Kayla nodded, a small but sincere smile on her face. "Thank you, Lucas. That's all I can ask for." As they sat together, the room felt quieter, more peaceful. Lucas didn't have all the answers, but he knew that whatever the future held, he wasn't facing it alone anymore. And neither was Kayla. Lucas sat quietly, staring at Kayla's hand still resting in his. Her fingers were soft, but her grip was firm, as if she was afraid he might pull away. The weight of her proposal hung in the air between them, thick and heavy. He could feel his heart beating faster, his thoughts racing. Kayla, the woman who had once been a queen in her own world, was asking him to marry her. But how could he say yes? They barely knew each other. Sure, he had been helping her for the past few days, and he couldn't deny that he felt a connection. But marriage, that was a huge step. He was just an ordinary guy, living an ordinary life. Could he really be the one to help Kayla rebuild hers? Kayla, Lucas finally said, breaking the silence. This is a lot to ask. I don't even know you that well. I don't know anything about your people, your world. How could I make a decision like this? Kayla's eyes dropped to the table, her face softening. I understand if it's too much. I never expected you to say yes immediately. But I don't have many options. I'm a stranger here, Lucas, and even if you don't know me well, you've already shown me more kindness than anyone else ever has. Lucas's heart twisted at her words. He had always believed in helping others, but this situation felt different. He wasn't just offering her food or shelter. He was offering her a future, something neither of them had ever considered before. The thought of it felt overwhelming. I don't want you to think this is just about helping you out of pity, Kayla continued. It's not like that. I'm not asking you to take care of me out of kindness alone. I'm asking because I don't want to be alone anymore. I don't want to be rejected again. Lucas swallowed hard, the weight of her pleas sinking deep into him. She had lost everything. Her title, her people, her home. All she had now was him. And yet, how could he give her something as big as marriage when he had his own doubts, his own fears? You're asking a lot, Kayla, Lucas said quietly. But I can't pretend I don't feel something here. I'm not sure what it is, but I can't ignore it. I don't know if I'm the right person to help you. I don't even know if I'm ready for something like this. But you're right about one thing. I can't just leave you out there on your own. Kayla's eyes softened as she listened to him. And for a moment, Lucas thought he saw a flicker of hope in her expression. She wasn't asking for everything all at once. She wasn't demanding the impossible. She just wanted someone to stand by her side. Someone who wouldn't turn away, no matter what. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling. That's all I need right now. Just someone to be there. Lucas took a deep breath. His heart was heavy, and his mind was still unsure. But he knew one thing for sure. Kayla needed him. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, he couldn't turn his back on her. I'll help you, Lucas said, his voice steady, though his mind was still in turmoil. But we'll have to take this one step at a time. Let's not rush things. Kayla nodded, a small but sincere smile on her face. Thank you, Lucas. That's all I can ask for. As they sat together, the room felt quieter, more peaceful. Lucas didn't have all the answers, but he knew that whatever the future held, he wasn't facing it alone anymore. And neither was Kayla. The days that followed were peaceful, but a sense of unease began to settle over Kayla. Lucas had noticed it too. She had become more withdrawn, staring off into the distance as if lost in thought. At first, he thought it was just the weight of her past catching up with her, but there was something more to it. It wasn't just sadness, it was fear. One evening, as they sat together on the couch watching TV, Kayla suddenly stood up, her eyes wide and alert. I need to leave, she said, her voice trembling. Lucas jumped to his feet, concern rising in him. Leave? Where are you going? What's wrong? Kayla took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. They're coming, she whispered. My people. They found me. Lucas frowned. Your people? Who are you talking about? They're the ones who cast me out, Kayla said, her voice cold now. The ones who rejected me. I didn't want to come back, but they've been looking for me. They want me back, for reasons I can't explain. Her eyes locked onto his, filled with fear. If they find me here, they'll take me. And they'll take you too. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. He had always known there was something different about Kayla, but he hadn't expected this. You're saying they're coming here, to Earth? Kayla nodded, her expression grim. Yes, I knew this day would come eventually. I just didn't think it would be so soon. Lucas stepped closer to her, his protective instincts kicking in. What are we supposed to do? How can we stop them? Kayla shook her head. There's nothing we can do. They're powerful, more powerful than you can imagine. They have the resources to find me, no matter where I go. They'll track me down, and when they do, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Lucas understood. They would take her back, force her into the life she had tried so hard to escape. Her people wouldn't care about her feelings or the life she was trying to build here. To them, she was just a piece on a chessboard, a tool to be used. But you don't have to go back, Lucas said, his voice firm. I won't let them take you. We'll figure something out. Kayla looked at him, her eyes softening. I wish it were that simple, but they won't just leave me alone. They'll destroy everything I've built here. You included. I don't want to put you in danger. I can handle it, Lucas said, more determined than ever. We'll figure this out together. If they come for you, they'll have to deal with me too. Kayla looked at him, her heart heavy. For the first time since they had met, she saw him not just as someone offering kindness, but as someone willing to fight for her, someone who would stand by her no matter the danger. Thank you, Lucas, she whispered, but I don't want to drag you into my mess. I'm not worth it. Lucas shook his head, his voice steady. You are worth it, Kayla. I don't care where you come from or who your people are. I care about you. Kayla's eyes filled with emotion, and for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped. But then, the reality of their situation came crashing back. The threat wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. They didn't know when or where the danger would strike, but Kayla was sure of one thing. Whatever happened next, Lucas was going to be a part of it, and she would do everything she could to protect him from the chaos that was coming. The first step would be survival. The rest could wait. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Lucas and Kayla only grew stronger. They knew that danger was looming over them, but life went on as best as it could. Lucas did everything in his power to keep Kayla safe, but even he couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming, something neither of them could escape. Despite the fear and uncertainty, there was something else that had begun to blossom between them. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about connection, about finding something real in the midst of chaos. Every moment they spent together seemed to bring them closer, and the bond between them deepened in ways neither of them had expected. One evening, after a long day of work, Lucas returned to the apartment to find Kayla sitting by the window, staring out at the city. Her eyes were distant, lost in thought. You okay? Lucas asked, setting his keys down on the table. Kayla turned to face him, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. I'm fine, she said, though her voice betrayed her. There was still a sadness in her eyes, a weight she couldn't shake. Lucas walked over and sat beside her, his gaze following hers out the window. You don't have to pretend everything's fine, he said gently. I can tell something's on your mind. Kayla looked down at her hands, her fingers nervously twisting the fabric of her clothes. I keep thinking about what you said, she murmured. That you would protect me, no matter what. It means more to me than you know, Lucas, but I can't help but wonder. Why? Lucas turned to look at her, his expression soft. He had always tried to protect her, always tried to help her. But now, as Kayla asked the question, he realized he didn't have a simple answer. The words he had said, the promises he had made, they were true. But why? I don't know, he said honestly, his voice quiet. Maybe it's because you've been through so much. Or maybe it's because, for the first time, I'm not just helping someone out of pity or obligation. I care about you, Kayla. I want to see you safe and happy. And I think I'm starting to feel something more than just responsibility. Kayla's eyes widened, and she turned to face him fully. You care about me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She had never expected to hear those words from him, not after everything she had been through. Lucas nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. Yeah, I do. More than I thought possible. You're not just someone I'm helping. You're someone I want to protect. Someone I want to be with. Kayla's breath caught in her throat. For so long, she had kept her distance, afraid of getting too close to anyone. She had been betrayed before, cast out by her own people. But now, sitting here with Lucas, hearing him speak so honestly, she realized that maybe she wasn't as alone as she had thought. Maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she truly belonged. I don't know what to say, Kayla admitted, her voice shaking with emotion. I've never felt this way before. I didn't think it was possible to trust anyone again. You don't have to say anything, Lucas replied, his hand gently reaching out to take hers. You don't have to trust me all at once. But I'm here, Kayla. And I'm not going anywhere. The word hummed between them, heavy with meaning. Kayla squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never felt more certain about anything in her life than she did at that moment. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were truly living together, and in a world full of uncertainty. That was enough. As they sat there, their hands intertwined, the night stretched on, and for the first time in a long while, Kayla felt like everything was going to be okay. She wasn't sure how they would face the challenges ahead, but one thing was clear: they would face them together. And that made all the difference. The days were growing tense. Lucas and Kayla could feel it. There was no avoiding the fact that her past was catching up with her, and the danger was becoming very real. They had lived in fear of the day when Kayla's people would come for her, and now that day was drawing closer. It was a rainy evening when the knock came. A hard, insistent knock on the door. Kayla froze, her eyes going wide with fear. Lucas could see it in her face, the terror that she had been trying so hard to hide. She knew what it meant. "They're here," she whispered, her voice tight with panic. Lucas stood up immediately, his mind racing. "What do we do?" Kayla turned to him, her eyes filled with an emotion he hadn't seen before. I don't know," she said, shaking her head. "They'll take me, Lucas. They'll take me back to my world. And you'll be caught in the middle of it." He stepped forward, his voice calm but determined. "No, I'm not letting that happen. We'll figure something out. Together." But Kayla looked away, her face full of sorrow. "You don't understand, Lucas. I've been running from them for so long. They won't stop until they have me. I'm not safe here. And neither are you." Lucas clenched his fists, frustration rising in him. "I don't care about that. I'm not going to let them take you. I don't care who they are, Kayla. They won't get away with it." She stood up slowly, her shoulders slumped. She had never felt so torn. On one hand, she didn't want to go back. She had escaped everything she had known, hoping for a fresh start. But on the other hand, she knew the consequences of rejecting her people. They wouldn't just let her go, they would make her pay. And now, Lucas was in danger too. "They'll never stop looking for me," Kayla said softly, her voice breaking. "They will come for you too, if they think I'm here with you." Lucas took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Then we'll leave. We'll go somewhere they can't find us. We don't have to face them alone. We can run together." Kayla looked at him, her eyes full of confusion and sadness. "And what if they catch us? What if we're always looking over our shoulders, never safe? I can't keep dragging you through this. You deserve a life without this fear. Without me." Her words hit him like a punch to the stomach. The thought of losing her, of letting her go, tore at him. He had come to care for her more than he ever thought possible. He couldn't imagine his life without her. "Kayla," he said softly, stepping closer to her. "I don't want a life without you. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. You're not alone. I'm not going anywhere." Kayla's eyes filled with tears, and she took a shaky breath. "I don't want to go back," she whispered, almost pleading. "But I don't want you to get hurt either. I'm not the person you think I am. I'm just broken." Lucas reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands. "You're not broken, Kayla. You're stronger than you think. And no matter what happens, we'll face it together." Kayla looked at him, her heart aching. She had never been more certain of anything. She knew she couldn't run from her past forever, but maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face it alone. "I'll stay," Kayla said quietly, her voice filled with determination. "I'll stay with you, Lucas. Whatever happens, I'm not leaving." In that moment, something shifted between them. They weren't just two people caught in a world of uncertainty. They were partners. They would face whatever came next together. The knock on the door sounded again, louder this time. But now, Kayla was ready. Ready to face whatever her past had in store, because she had Lucas by her side, and that made all the difference. They didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, they weren't afraid of it. Not when they had each other. The sound of the knock echoed through the apartment, and Kayla felt a chill run down her spine. It was no longer a question of if her people would find her, but when. She had known this day would come, but now that it was here, she was afraid, more than she had ever been before. Lucas stood beside her, his jaw set, his eyes full of determination. He was ready to face whatever came through that door. Kayla could see it in the way he held himself. He wasn't backing down, not for anything. And yet, she felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "I don't want you to get hurt," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lucas turned to her, his eyes softening. "I'm not letting them take you. Not without a fight." She shook her head, torn between her need to protect him and her desire to face her past. "You don't understand. They won't just hurt us. They'll destroy everything. They'll take you too, Lucas. You'll become a target just because you're with me." Lucas reached out and gently took her hand, squeezing it. "I don't care about that," he said firmly. "I won't let them have you. You don't have to fight alone. Not anymore." Kayla's heart ached with emotion. She had spent so long trying to avoid getting close to anyone, afraid of losing them, but Lucas had broken down those walls. He had become the person she never expected to need, and now she was facing the possibility of losing him. The knock came again, louder this time. Lucas looked at her, his expression hard. "I'll answer it," he said. "You stay here and don't move." Kayla nodded, but her heart was racing. She couldn't just hide. She couldn't run from her past anymore. She had to make a choice. She had to decide whether she was going to face her people and accept what they would do to her, or whether she would stand by Lucas, no matter the cost. "I can't hide forever," she said, her voice shaking. "I can't keep running." Lucas looked at her, his eyes full of concern. "You don't have to do it alone. I'll stand with you, Kayla. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." For the first time in weeks, Kayla felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she didn't have to face her past alone. Maybe, just maybe, she could make a new future with Lucas by her side. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be safe. But together, they could face whatever came their way. The knock came again, even louder, and Kayla knew this was it. The moment had arrived. The door was being forced open, and she had to make her decision. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. "Let's face them." Lucas didn't hesitate. He stepped toward her, his hand still holding hers. He didn't let go, not even when they heard the footsteps approaching from the other side of the door. He was with her. And that was all that mattered. As the door swung open, Kayla stood tall beside him, her shoulders squared. She wasn't going to let fear control her anymore. She had made her choice. She wasn't going to run. And with Lucas by her side, Kayla was ready to face whatever her past had in store for her. No matter what happened, they would face it together. The door creaked open, and in the dim light of the apartment, the figures standing in the doorway were unmistakable. They weren't just ordinary people. They were members of Kayla's people, alien figures dressed in dark, sleek armor. Their eyes gleamed with authority and power, and the air around them seemed to shimmer with a cold, unyielding presence. Kayla's heart skipped a beat, But she didn't step back. She stood tall beside Lucas, her hand still gripped in his. "Kayla." One of the figures spoke, a deep voice laced with command. "It's time to come home." Kayla's jaw tightened and her gaze hardened. "I'm not going back," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. The figure took a step forward, studying her with piercing eyes. "You have no choice. You belong to us, Kayla. Your people will not tolerate your defiance. The time for your return has come." Lucas stepped forward, his hand still holding Kayla's, standing beside her like a shield. He wasn't going to let them take her without a fight. "You can't just take her. She's not going back with you. Not without a reason." The alien figure's gaze shifted toward Lucas, sizing him up, then turned back to Kayla. "And you, human, think you can stop us? You don't understand the weight of this." Kayla's grip on Lucas's hand tightened, her pulse quickening. The fear was still there, but now something else burned within her. Determination. She wasn't going to be dragged back to the life she had escaped. Not when she had someone willing to stand by her, someone who believed in her. "You don't get it," Kayla said, her voice steady, though there was a fire in her eyes. "I'm not your pawn anymore. I've made my choice. I'm not going back to a life where I'm nothing more than a tool. I'm staying here, and I'm staying with him." Lucas's heart swelled with pride as he squeezed her hand. He had no idea what was coming, but in that moment, he knew he wasn't going to let her face it alone. Whatever the consequences, they would face it together. The alien figures looked at each other, murmuring among themselves. Kayla could feel the weight of their gaze, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to be afraid anymore. "You've made your choice," the lead figure said, his voice colder now. "But know this, Kayla. We won't forget this. You will always be one of us, no matter where you go." Kayla nodded, her chin lifted high. "I'm done with you. I don't belong to you. I belong here." The figure studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "So be it," he said with finality. With a gesture, he turned and motioned for the others to follow. They didn't take her by force. They didn't try to fight. They just left, vanishing into the night, as quietly as they had come. Kayla let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her legs shaking with the sudden release of tension. She turned to Lucas, her eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel for so long. "Thank you," she whispered. Lucas pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I told you, I'm not going anywhere." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Kayla realized that this was just the beginning. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be struggles ahead. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a future with someone who cared for her, someone who had her back. Together, they would face whatever the world threw at them. They were no longer bound by the past or the expectations of others. The future was theirs to shape, and Kayla knew, with Lucas by her side, they could face anything. And as they held each other in the quiet of the night, the world outside seemed a little less frightening, a little less uncertain, because together they had everything they needed, and nothing could take that away.